To Europe, where the Papal Conclave As I was saying previously, we now move over to Europe, where the Papal Conclave to elect a new leader of the Catholic Church is set to begin from today. A record 133 cardinals from 70 countries will enter the Sistine Chapel on Wednesday, up from 115 from 48 nations in the last conclave in 2013. Among them, 52 hail from Europe, 23 from Asia, 17 from South or Central America, 17 from Africa, 20 from North America, and 4 from Oceania. Barred from leaving or making any contact with the outside world, the church leaders must vote until they select the next leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. When the choice is made, white smoke will billow from the apostolic palace. Soon after, the next pope will emerge onto the balcony to greet his flock. The morning service has concluded with a final antiphon addressed to the Virgin Mary, and the cardinals have filed out of St. Peter's Basilica. The cardinals will now take one last long break for lunch and a final period of reflection before gathering in the Sistine Chapel for the start of the conclave this afternoon. In his homily, Cardinal Ray, who is ineligible to vote due to his age, made what seemed to be a Franciscan call to cherish diversity. The candidate who secures 2/3 of the votes is elected as the Pope. Up to 4 rounds of voting can typically take place in a day. If no clear choice has emerged after 3 days, balloting is suspended for 24 hours to allow cardinal electors time to reflect. Another 7 rounds of balloting then takes place, followed by another break, and so on. We stay in Europe now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging more pressure on Russia. He demands tougher sanctions to force diplomacy forward. This comes in response to the Russian missile and drone strikes in Kiev early this morning. The strike left 2 people dead and 7 others injured. Several children are among the injured, according to some reports. Fires broke out in residential buildings across multiple districts as drone debris rained down. Air defences intercepted at least 1 missile and 11 drones, but damage remains widespread. Ukraine responded with drone attacks on Moscow and surrounding regions. Russian officials say more than 140 airborne threats were shot down. Airports across the capital were shot down overnight for the 3rd night in a row. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping is due to start a 4-day visit to Russia on Wednesday for a high-stakes visit. He will meet President Vladimir Putin and attend the Victory Day parade. The visit signals a deepening alliance amid growing tensions with the West. In another development, Moscow released a sharp diplomatic statement, saying there's no reason to expect improved ties with Germany under Chancellor Friedrich Merz, criticising Berlin's stance on military aid to Ukraine. We move over back to the Middle East, where in a major breakthrough in the Red Sea crisis, the United States and Yemen's Houthi rebels have agreed to a ceasefire, with Oman stepping in as the mediator. The deal is meant to end months of tensions and attacks on global shipping routes. Oman's foreign minister says both sides have agreed not to target one another, a move aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the region. This comes after US President Donald Trump announced an end to American airstrikes. He says the rebels have capitulated after weeks of US bombardment that reportedly killed around 300 fighters. The Houthis had stepped up attacks on merchant vessels and fired missiles at Israel, saying that they were standing in solidarity with Gaza. They paused during a Gaza ceasefire but resumed threats in March, prompting a strong US military response. Despite the new truce, Houthi leader Mahad al-Mashat vows attacks on Israel will continue. His spokesperson warned that any renewed US action would be met with retaliation. The Pentagon says US strikes since March have hit over 1,000 targets in Yemen. Let's now turn back over to North America, where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met with US President Donald Trump at the White House, delivering a clear message that Canada is not for sale. This marked Carney's first meeting with Trump since winning the April 28th election on a promise to oppose US tariffs and reject talk of annexation. Carney told Trump to stop referring to Canada as the 51st state. Let's take a listen in to what he had to say about this.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
Despite their sharp differences, both leaders kept a friendly tone during their Oval Office photo op. Trump described the meeting as great, while Carney called it constructive. They agreed to begin talks on a new economic and security relationship. Let's hear both the leaders' reactions.
No, I don't see any tension either. We get along very well with both. They just got to pay a little more money, you know. They're just they're getting away with things that they shouldn't be, and they understand. We had a great meeting today.
President Trump and I met today as leaders of two sovereign independent nations. And I want to thank the President and the members of his cabinet that attended for
Trump thinks that the US doesn't need Canadian products. He also repeated his claims that a US trade deficit with Canada, despite data showing Canada's trade surplus, dropped in March after new tariffs took effect. Trump's tariffs on steel, aluminium and auto parts have already impacted Canadians' imports, which fell $3.7 billion in March. While Trump called the USMCA trade deal fine, Carney said some parts of it needed to be updated. Let's listen in to what Carney said about the tariff deal.
We're having a very complex negotiation about a wide range of issues. And it's, as I said before I came here, I wouldn't have expected white smoke coming out of this meeting. That was not my expectation, that because of the nature of the negotiation. So you don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress, because that's why it's a global negotiation.